From New Jersey, this is Low Fidelity. I'm Jeff Heller.
And I'm Mike Labrie. On this episode, we will be reviewing the soundtrack to the video game Katamari Damacy from Namco.
You can support Low Fidelity by reviewing us on iTunes, subscribing to us on our Reddit and YouTube channels, and by following @Lo-Fi Podcast on Twitter.
Indeed. All the links you need are in the description of this episode. You are always welcome, however, to share any feedback in the comments or send us an email, feedback@lowfidelity.info.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Low Fidelity. We've been having some fun, I'd say, between recordings, Mike. We've had video games to play. We've had a very fun album to listen to or re-listen to for both of us.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, though, I actually want to jump back to the previous episode real quick because I said in that episode that I was going to review the vinyl for Vib-ribbon once I got my hands on it.
Right.
I thankfully have it in my hands. It was quite a tale to get this thing. I won't give you the full detail, but basically the post office tried to deliver this during the hurricane that we had. Not only did I not get it during the hurricane, but it was delivered apparently to the wrong address.
Oh my goodness.
And so 4 days later, it randomly appears on my doorstep somehow, whatever, some kind of divine intervention there. For my quick review of the vinyl, I just want to mention that this is actually like a vinyl release of the 2004 soundtrack that I referenced a couple times during that recording. You have the level start music before each song starts. That's very similar to the 2004 release, but there is some really good mastering being done on some of the tracks. Like on Sunny Day, you really appreciate the format because a lot of those mid-range sounds are now much more pronounced. Some of the in-between instrumentals are clearer. The bass is punchier, especially on Polaroid. It was like a punch to the face every time the bass kicked in. And then Overflowing Emotions had some really nice thick bass. So overall, they did a really good job. I think the biggest question people are going to have about this is, what is this new song? Rainbow is, I would say, thematically consistent with Vib-ribbon, with the game and the rest of the soundtrack, but there is no Yoko on it. And so right away, I can tell you that I'm slightly disappointed just because of that, because I really think Yoko sold that soundtrack.
And let me ask, do they put this as the last track on the vinyl?
They do.
Okay.
It is different. It's actually a slightly longer song as well. And I think the most disappointing thing, apart from Yoko not being there, is that there are no ramping tempos in the track. So it does feel like something slapped on and not so much like a song that was scrapped on the editing floor.
Like a lost song, something like that, sure.
Exactly. But it was still enjoyable. You can find it online. People have ripped the vinyl already, of course, and put it up there. So you can give it a listen. It's very interesting. I think the vinyl's still sold out. If not, I'll update that on Twitter. Oh, and of course, the artwork is very nice on the front. It's very interesting material. I had to pry the plastic off of the vinyl because it's this weird semi-transparent material that they put on it. Yeah, overall, a very good release. So very happy to have it. I mentioned that we've been playing some games.
Yeah.
It turns out there's a platform for people who want to watch us doing those things.
Have you heard about this thing, kids?
Yeah, I think I make it sound like we're the last people to know that this thing exists.
Oh, yeah. I mean, come quarantine, everyone decided they wanted to stream. Everyone decided they wanted to podcast. You can't buy any equipment for either of these things anymore.
Yeah.
So we were lucky that we already had a lot of what we needed.
That's so true. You brought this up to me before we even began re-recording, which was that, it's a good thing we have our equipment still, because if we wanted to get it again, it's virtually sold out everywhere.
I just wanted backups. I need replacements in case something breaks. It's like, you want that tiny little $30 thing you have? Well, guess what? Now it's $80.
Well, I would say, thankfully, we do have our equipment and enough equipment to have us go on Twitch. For those listeners who don't know what we're talking about, Twitch is a website where you can basically live stream yourself doing whatever at this point, even though it was initially made for gamers in particular. I played Vib-ribbon on it a couple times. Mike, you've been playing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Most recently, Katamari, of course, and Final Fantasy 14. You have some really good performances there. So do you want to tell the lovely people how to find you there?
Sure. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. I'm not looking to be a Twitch streamer, but every once in a while I'm going to pop something on and play along and chat along. So, I mean, I'm the same name everywhere, Vegito EX, VEGETTOEX. Look me up. Whether it's just I'm hanging out playing FF14, you want to chat, or, I'm playing something ahead of one of these episodes. I was playing Katamari, and that was its own debacle. Like, I'm just going to emulate the PS2 version. The game won't rip. Oh, it ripped fine. All right, never mind. Let me load it. Okay. And now the Nana song is just endlessly looping in my head due to an emulation error, and it won't stop. Please help me.
That was such an ordeal, and yet I was laughing so hard because I'm in the middle of chopping vegetables as I'm listening to this, and the na is going off, and my wife is looking at me like, what is he doing? What is this? I'm like, it's not like, I don't know. For myself, I'm also on Twitch, but I've just been going on there whenever I feel like it. Essentially, I guess my Mike. You can say the same thing for yourself as well, but I don't have a username that really works well in audio form, but I'll tell you anyway. It's JHGFD82. You can find me there. I also did a stream once where I was compiling notes for this episode.
Yeah, I saw that. I was busy, so I couldn't pop in, but I was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. It's related, but it's different.
Yeah, I might do that again in the future. I only had one person show up, but I do think it's interesting to be able to show your sources whenever you can. And so, of course, that interactivity with people, if they feel like I should be checking something out in regards to researching an album, I would totally be open for it. So keep an eye out. The best way, if you don't want to follow us on Twitch, follow us on Twitter because we will post there when we go live.
Sure.
I'd say that's it though, Mike. You ready to get into this review?
Oh my goodness. Let's do it, please. Yes. Katamari Damacy is a third-person puzzle action game originally released for the PlayStation 2. It was developed for Japanese video game company Namco by lead developer Keita Takahashi and was released in Japan in March 2004 and later that same year in North America. You play as a prince whose father, the king of all cosmos, destroys the stars and other celestial bodies after a night of heavy drinking. You roll around on Earth with a studded ball called a Katamari, which acts like an overpowered vacuum, collecting small items. But as the Katamari grows bigger, so too do the things you can pick up. So you can quickly go from grabbing mahjong tiles and erasers to whole continents and weather formations in minutes. Katamari Damacy quickly became a global franchise, even with Takahashi's departure after the release of the second game, with 13 games for various platforms as of this recording.
The music from the first game, however, released as Katamari Fortissimo Damacy, is undoubtedly a big contributor to the game's appeal, and that is all thanks to lead sound designer Yu Miyake. Takahashi gave Miyake complete autonomy toward building a soundtrack that would fit the carefree and boundless world of Katamari Damacy. In order to do so, Miyake enlisted fellow Namco game composers to handle music and lyrics. Any genre or style could be considered fitting for the game, leading to the wide variety of sounds in the soundtrack, but a particular style of Japanese music known as Shibuya-kei would form its basis. In addition to that, vocalists were brought in who, according to Miyake, were well known in Japan, but nobody had heard from them in a while for whatever reason. This combination would earn the soundtrack its own critical acclaim and awards and would be widely recognized as one of the best video game soundtracks of the decade.
All right, I am fairly certain that I first heard of and played the game. It was in our old apartment. You brought it, which is strange to me because you did not own a PlayStation 2 as far as I remember.
All right, I keep forgetting my own story, and I guess that's true.
And so it was already out in America. It was the American release. It must have just come out. And I remember us playing it. Were we having a party or something? I feel like I remember a bunch of AMV folks over, but I remember playing the game and just going down to GameStop probably the next day. The game came out here at a budget price. I'm fairly certain it was $20 at release because Namco brought it over here as like this little curiosity and had no real hopes or expectations for it. And I'm pretty sure We Love Katamari came out at $30 following the success of this first game, but it had to have been right around release. I'm pretty sure it was you.
I think that makes sense because I will say that, memories are flooding back, hence my laughter as we're talking. I really have trouble remembering this era of my life, apparently, but I do recall that I was pretty much the evangelist for this game when it came out. I first heard about the game back in, I believe, May of that year because of file sharing sites. One of these sites had the soundtrack, and it was honestly the cover that got my attention. Saw it was a video game soundtrack, and it sounded pretty interesting, and the colors of the cover really got me interested, so gave it a download, gave it a listen, and it was one of those things where first listen, I was instantly hooked and just completely fell in love with it. And I saw from that point gameplay trailers. There were, YouTube wasn't really a thing at all at that point, but there were videos of the game on gaming websites. So that all got me hooked, and the low price tag certainly helped. I mean, this isn't really all that important, but I think what happened was that we were on the way to a convention, and buddies of mine that I was going with had a PlayStation 2.
Okay.
So I was like, you know what, for this cheap price tag, and this thing looks incredible, I'm going to buy the game and just find some excuse to have the guys play it at this convention.
So you did actually buy the game yourself. So you owned it. That part is true.
That is 100% true,
Okay.
because I bought it specifically so we could play it at this convention.
Okay, so this all lines up.
Yes, it definitely does. And I convinced everybody to give it a shot. We all fell in love with it. In fact, so much so that we created an event during that convention, since one of the guys was head of the video room. We made this event where I would play head to head with one of our friends in front of an audience. We played the last level and got to see who was making the biggest Katamari in the shortest amount of time. And I won both those achievements, which is like one of the first public appearances of this gameplay. I think we basically sold the game to everybody who attended this thing.
That gone, yeah.
Yeah, this is a game I've loved for years. I should say, though, that my love of the game really does come down to its soundtrack. That is really why I'm so enthusiastic about this episode in particular. Before we get to our review, though, we usually have our standard format, which is the required listening that comes first. And really, Mike, I didn't think of much in terms of what I might tell someone to listen to before coming into this, besides the music that we reviewed in our last episode from Nana Onsha, Parappa the Rapper, and Vib-ribbon, because of that cut and paste style that we see in Shibuya-kei.
Yeah.
That shows up here. Did you happen to come up with anything else?
I don't know. It's really tough. Just thinking back to some of the things that we've done in the past, there were a couple songs where I'm like, no, you can get an Anamanaguchi vibe out of the way that they're doing some of the electronic stuff with the real instruments and performances over top. There's not really a connection, but like I can sort of hear some of like Rez in the background here, just like this procedural, just working electronic stuff that you're also adding to. Once you get to some of that swing and the big band music, I think to things like some of the later 3D Mario games where they did the like the full orchestral and band soundtracks in there. But yeah, Katamari is kind of like a world to its own.
Yeah, I agree. I also think part of that too is that we're in this era of video game music where the CD allows for, I'm going to say quote unquote real music, but basically music that isn't coming from a chip specifically. So you have composers who are now able to bring in orchestras and more complex synthesizers, opening up this wide breadth of creativity that was not there in these limited sound chips. I think that's definitely part of it. And that's why I think it's so hard to really come up with something to listen to besides just Shibuya-kei. But we're going to get into that style and some of the artists later on. All right, let's go over the thematic elements first here. I want to address the lyrical content first, Mike, because this game is very simple. The instructions are simple. The premise is crazy, but simple. But these lyrics have like this weird love song basis to them mixed in with game instruction. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's kind of like Vib-ribbon, where you go back and you're like, oh my God, this whole soundtrack is about overcoming depression. And you don't realize it as you're playing the game necessarily. And I gotta tell you, I've been playing this game for how many years at this point? I've never bothered to look up the actual lyrics other than what is natively in English and what I can pick out in Japanese. And yeah, it was certainly strange.
Yeah, definitely strange. And I would agree with you. I hadn't really looked at the lyrics until having to do this review. And the way it just recontextualizes everything is so strange. And I think we'll really bring that out as we go through track by track. First, though, I think it's very important to look at who makes up the soundtrack. We will definitely talk about the vocalists, but first things first, let's talk about the personnel behind the music. And we'll start with lead sound designer Yu Miyake. Mike, tell me a little bit about him.
Right. So Miyake bit the music bug big time. Yellow Magic Orchestra, of course, who he says was really popular when he was in 6th grade. One CD in particular that he loved listening to was by Haruomi Hosono, the bassist of YMO, where he rearranged the music of Namco games. Now, video game music was released in 1984 and featured the game sounds and themes from games like Pac-Man and Galaga. And while everyone else was listening to J-pop, Miyake was listening to VGM. His entry into Namco is rather simple. The game industry was growing. He asked Namco for a job, and they said yes. His first job was in Tekken 3, a very popular fighting game in 1998. He would work with Takahashi on a video project called Texas 2000, and Takahashi was so impressed they asked him to take full responsibility as sound designer here in Katamari Damacy.
We'll get into each individual person as they come up during the soundtrack, but I want to bring up a genre first before we continue. Pretty important to the soundtrack, and that is Shibuya-kei. Now, I find Shibuya-kei to be be increasingly hard to define because the definition itself tends to expand the more you look into it. But I think the genre is actually an amazing example of what happens when culture travels around the world. Shibuya-kei itself, though, is a niche form of Japanese pop music that grew to mainstream popularity around the mid to late 1990s. It originated from the Shibuya district of Tokyo, and the style features a sort of cut and paste aesthetic where various styles would be combined. And if you listen to our last episode, this should sound really familiar. However, there is a prominent influence of 1960s Western culture that is what it's most known for. At one turn, you could be hearing the French pop of Serge Gainsbourg, and in the next breath, you're hit with the crystallized nostalgia of the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson and Burt Bacharach bouncing on bossa nova rhythms. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Go listen to Pizzicato 5 or Cornelius or Fantastic Plastic Machine and tell me I'm off base. But let's unpack that a little bit more here because I think this part is really fascinating. Bossa nova itself, right, which I would say sort of like the basis of Shibuya-kei, at least what it started with, that originated in Brazil around 1950s, 1960s, and it came to the US via The Girl from Ipanema, classic track. It also went to France in the soundtrack of the hit film Un homme et une femme in the 1960s. Then, as Japan experiences its economic swell in the 70s and 80s, the music travels to Japan on the coattails of French fashion, and those fashion trends end up in the shops of Shibuya, which affects the music being sold there, and then the kids in those shops get their hands on sampling technology, and boom, you have Shibuya-kei. This is oversimplified, of course, but that is quite a journey from where it's originated to the other side of the world in that example. Now, the definition has expanded over time due to a growing number of influences mixing in with the core aesthetic, and that's where I think the Katamari Damacy soundtrack fits into all this. Nothing is sacred, anything can be used at any time, and slapping it against these other nostalgic genres of music are what make it reminiscent of Shibuya-kei. But another thing I think we should bring up, and that is this very interesting genre of music in Japan called enka. There's going to be a number of vocalists that come from other genres like J-rock and J-pop and jazz in the soundtrack, but some of them are going to come from this particular style of music. Mike, why don't you tell me a little bit about what enka is?
Sure. So enka is a traditional form of Japanese blues music. It goes as far back as the Meiji era in the late 1800s. It splintered off from its musical origins after World War II, when Western pop music would alter its structure and melodic framework, but it's maintained its somber style of sentimental ballads mixed with lyrics tackling topics like heartbreak, personal loss, and self-determination. You can tell an enka performance by heavy vibrato in the singing, and traditional Japanese instruments may be mixed in with more modern production. Though the style is still popular today with the older generation, many vocalists during its heyday in the 70s and 80s have moved on to other projects or have retired completely, which is why this soundtrack has heavy cultural relevance in Japan. We have similar stories in the West of this kind of thing, like when movies based in previous time periods would feature a compilation of songs from that period as the soundtrack and would subsequently earn those artists a renewed boost in popularity. I do want to mention one artist in particular real quick if you're coming over from my Dragon Ball side of things, Kiyoshi Hikawa. He performed the Limit Break Survivor, the second opening theme to the Dragon Ball Super TV series. Transitioned a little bit into the pop music side of things there, but is one of those modern day enka singers, a superstar in Japan right now. It's still going strong, and we still have some of those younger folks trying to appeal to the older folks and then appealing right back down again to the younger folks.
Oh, that's really interesting. The whole idea that you're taking performers who have been long forgotten, like Miyake said, and give them this new life. It's kind of like the same thing you could say about the Studio Ghibli film Spirited Away, or in Japan it's called Sento Chihiro, where it features all these mythical Japanese gods. And, you know, to us in the US or in the West, this film is about a girl maturing in mythical landscape, and that's pretty much it. Whereas in Japan, it's this hugely relevant thing with all these gods that all represent different things, and they're all brought together in this movie, and it means so much more to them. And so I want to bring up enka here as a big part of the soundtrack because we adore this soundtrack how we perceive it, but it has this whole different perception over there where these figures are much more commonplace. All right, one last thing. The main theme that Miyake came up with for the soundtrack, which is flat out amazing. And of course he realizes that because this thing shows up quite often in, I would say, the bookending tracks. It's referenced here and there, which I think is really cute, and it does give it this cohesive feel to it, which I really appreciate. But with that said, let's go straight into track one, which, as far as I know, Mike, this is a demo recording, although I've seen competing information about this thing. It starts very simply. It's really just this guy humming and, slightly off tune here and there, which is kind of cute. But the vocalist credit on this track is Yu-sama. And this is where the conflicts come up because Yu-sama supposedly is this other person nobody knows anything about. But Mike, I would argue that Yu-sama is just Miyake Yu with with the sama suffix on it. Can you tell me what sama is and if I'm right?
Well, sama is, like you said, Japanese honorific. It's used for people of high esteem compared to you. So, for example, God is kami-sama.
So then do you think I'm right in that maybe Yu Miyake is calling himself Yu-sama because he's in charge of this project?
Possibly. It could be like a tongue-in-cheek, like I'm the god of this universe kind of thing. I hold myself in such high regard. It's possible.
All right, well, I guess we can't really know unless we look at the original kanji, which we're having some difficulty finding. So, hey, if anybody out there happens to know about this, tell me if I'm right. Is it Yu-sama, as in the honorific sama, or is it just this guy Yu-sama, who, just like some of the other names that we'll see credited here, just have no history? Maybe they're like some Namco intern or something that just, got a mic thrown in front of them, which I would totally believe happened in this case. I am fairly certain that this is the actual demo that he made on his recorder as he's humming to himself, trying to come up with song ideas, because just listen to it very closely. You can hear the hand fumbling in the background and these weird clicky noises as if he's holding a recorder walking down the street. Either way, I think this song's job as the intro track, we say a lot about track ones and how important they are to introduce the theme of an album. And I do think this actually does do a good job of that, because we are going to hear this theme so often. It is kind of nice to have this cutesy little opening to introduce it to us.
Yeah, you're getting the motif, but you're not getting the what we get in track 2 and 3 and 4, like onward from here. Like this is the easy introduction into what you're about to get. We're just setting the stage. Don't you worry, it's coming.
Let's go into the main theme of the entire album of this game. The name is Katamari on the Rocks main theme.
It's just the best. I love that little electronic drum breakdown as we get going, and then it just builds and builds, and it builds quickly, and you are into the song. They want you to know this is Katamari, this is where we're going, this is who we are, let's roll.
Exactly. It's very pronounced chords. They hammer that tonic home. So that is the way that you establish a theme. There's a good use of dominant chords in here. Very structurally sound, very well done. Something that we're going to do, by the way, as we go track by track here, is talk about the personnel, because we're talking about a number of songwriters here, different performers coming into this. And the composer of this track is Yu Miyake, fitting, of course. The lyrics were Miyake's as well as Keita Takahashi's. So you've got the game creator throwing in some of the lyrics explaining the what is, I think, a love story between characters, even though if you play the game, yeah, you could say the king and queen of the cosmos are kind of a love story, but it's not really a thing.
No, it's not.
But let's talk about the performers. And Mike, what can you tell me about Masayuki Tanaka?
Fist of the North Star, Crystal King you're mentioning here.
Yeah, so very prominent figure here. Also, we get the name Tomomi Suzuki, who I couldn't really find anything about. And it like I said, it seems like one of the Namco interns. Let me go to the lyrics. Clumping and rolling, I love you and I'll always smile for you. This love moon is just for you. Hey, so you gotta do your best. Compression.
It's a bit of nonsense.
A little bit, but I mean, it's cute in the way that it's not being treated seriously.
Yeah.
Like they give it this love feel just to make you feel like it's this traditional pop song.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's trying to show what kind of audience they're trying to reach. And not to mention that this is also music that's playing in the background of the levels in the game.
It is. I actually want to mention that real quick too, because this is one of the only real significant differences, I guess you could say, music wise. Japan knows this as level 1 music. We don't. We got, was it Wanda Wanda as track 1? So in Japan, you get going right into the main theme. Like this is what it is. And I feel that's the track we get when we get to it. We got such an awful first stage introduction music into it. What a bad decision. I can't imagine why they would do something like that.
Oh, that's so weird. I never remembered that.
I don't know. Maybe they felt like, Wanda Wanda, which is track 11, we'll get to it, which I think is not a good song anyway. So why would they switch it to that? Maybe it wasn't as weird as this, but I don't think this is weird at all. I think it's so confident in itself that, I mean, with the horns and with the breakdowns and the vocal delivery, like it knows what it is and it's just going for it. Why would you swap this?
parts of the song, I think, lend to this idea of a confident main theme. I actually want to spotlight two things here. First, the bongos. I'm going to just play a small sample from this track from Fantastic Plastic Machine. The song is called Bachelor Pad. If you've watched the Austin Powers movie, you might recognize this part of the soundtrack, actually. So I can see where the Shibuya-kei influence comes into this. I wouldn't say that it's particularly bossa nova, but once the horns kick in, yeah, it starts to sound like that kind of style. Masayuki Tanaka's vocal here is fantastic as well. He had a 3-octave range, which is really fantastic when it comes to male singing. Unfortunately, in 1989, he took a baseball to the throat. As a result, he lost that range from it. But honestly, regardless of that, I think he sounds terrific here.
Yeah.
I love his inflections. I love the ad-libs. Stellar. He's still screaming in part of this. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
One more thing. I'm going to throw a link in the description of this episode that brings you to a demo of this track. Something that they had originally composed before it went to the final version that we all know and love. You can actually hear it in re-roll as well. If you go to the staff credits, you can hear this demo version of the main theme as well. Very interesting to see where it came from.
Yeah, I guess I was reading it's actually they're still on the game disc, just hidden away in the data, just otherwise unused, and they brought it back for re-roll because it was there. Why not use it?
Moving on to track 3, we are introduced to this new composer. Her name is Asuka Sakai. I am going to bring her up a couple times in the soundtrack because I think I love her songs the most. Although Yumiyake, of course, I have a soft spot because he did the main theme, but Asuka has some great songs in here. She's also the performer on this overture, which is, of course, called Overture. Mike, what's your take on this, actually? Let me go with you first.
Yeah, it's just a nice arrangement of the motif. I like it. It's pretty. Let's get back into the stage music.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say that it is very much an interlude song. We have just this soft piano that Asuka is playing. The chords go all over the place. It's just very nice. But let's move on. Track 4, we know it as The Moon and the Prince. The composer is Akitaka Toyama. Also did the lyrics as well. The performers here, Kenji Ninuma and Fumina, who does the chorus. I have to ask you, Mike, do they even know who the prince is when it comes to the lyrics?
This is one of those where I've never actually looked up the lyrics before. Why would I? I'm playing the game. I think you noticed this when I was streaming the game the other day. I had a hard time having a conversation with folks. So you have to concentrate so hard playing the game that the music really, like, you definitely notice it and you're paying attention to it and you love it. But picking out some of those fine details when you're playing the game is difficult. But yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, definitely is. I also think that Kenji Ninuma's vocal inflections here are one of the highlights.
Yeah, I love this song because this is, especially in America where we didn't lead with Katamari on the Rocks, again, bizarre choice. So this is Make a Star 2 in the game. It's the living room in the park. And I feel like it's your first real taste of what is some of this level music going to be in the game. We got our Enka stuff going on. We've got our Bow Chicka Bow Wow. We've got, like, we're exploring hip hop at the same time. It's such a cool track.
And you know what, Mike? You said something there that I think is really important, which is that you get this feeling of, okay, this is what these tracks are going to be. We had the main theme, but this establishes sort of like the meandering middle parts.
Yeah, the rest of the world, for sure. Yeah. And it's crazy. I think we're going to talk about this, but it'll be like, well, what's a Katamari song? Well, it's this. But that sounds nothing like this other track. Yeah, well, so what? it's still true.
Come on.
But I think also, too, the first 3 tracks of the soundtrack are all C major, which, C major is like the backbone of modern music. Like, we know C major, almost without playing it. But the fact that this rests on a D makes it slightly different. And so we're getting into this new style of things. The song is still in the tonic of C major. It's just that the bass never hits the C until a small moment in the chorus. So that's really fascinating to me because there seems to be like this unease throughout the verses that kind of can't put your finger on it when you're listening to it. And you've got this voice there kind of speaking to you and, doing these funny ad-libs that I love. But the music is unsettled. And you know how I talk about tension and release all the time? Well, this is where that tension really shows up and it doesn't get released all that well. Even as the song fades out at the end, it feels undone. Like there's still more to go. And I really do like that here because it actually sets up the melody to change as we get into future songs. Before we move on from this, though, I'm actually going to make sure I link some example songs from these these vocalists, because hearing them on their own, it's actually really interesting to see how Katamari changes their context.
Yeah.
And, again, bringing in this idea that here's some cultural relevance that we aren't aware of just because we've never heard these people before. Ninuma, in particular, just has some really interesting Enka songs that I think people should listen to. So look forward to that. It'll be in the description of this episode. Great. We move on to Fugue number 7777 and Asuka Sakai once again. It's short. It's sweet. I think it's a nice interlude track. And actually, Mike, I think we're getting a pattern here where we get these major songs interspersed with minor songs. Do you think I'm right about that?
Yeah, totally. Because this is that kind of like in between the dialogue and the menu music, in between the stage songs. And I think you need that. Like you get the release from something like this little transitional piece, just like it is in the game too.
Yeah, it's not to say that these songs are highly dramatic. It's just that there's so much activity. We get these periods of brevity, I think, is how they work. And so even this is kind of, it's like this cute in-between song.
I think it works so much better this way rather than the other option would be, and I've seen game soundtracks do this, where it's like play all of the major like stage songs all in a row, then put all the incidental music at the end. And I don't think that would work as well as a listening kind of procedure for this album.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where this album in particular strays away from a lot of other video game soundtracks, where it just does so much better at being an album other than just a video game soundtrack. It's fair to say a lot of people are looking forward to this particular song, and that is Lonely Rolling Star.
Yeah, this is the single, I guess you would say, if you're going to like assign some kind of category to it. I mean, it's the banger here for sure.
Definitely. The composer of this track is Yoshihito Yano, also took care of the lyrics as well. The performer is Saki Kabata, and we'll get into her later on. My God, the lyrics here. It's so sad. I mean, how did you feel about these lyrics, Mike?
Again, I only looked them up to do this recording. I almost wish I hadn't, because now it's even more sad. Like in the song itself, it feels like an uplifting, but kind of like mellow, bordering on sad kind of like portions in the delivery. And then you look at it and, I'm sorry.
And Saki is singing so cutely here.
Yeah.
Her performance is really endearing, so you don't expect anything. And then you get to lyrics like, next month, shall we meet at that place? Come on, never stop standing still. Remember me, okay? I can't keep on waiting. Oh my God. So face forward and keep going. That's just like, it just tugs at the heartstrings. And actually, just I think a funny lyric as well that I really love, which is those two eyes right down to the pupils are like sunflowers and their seeds.
I mean, that's the kind of thing. You're in love. You're like, I love everything about you. Your eyes remind me of this.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny because if you look at the character design of the prince, they are literally sunflower seeds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's so true. But this yearning and this waiting, this person who's in love with this other person, they're waiting for them to come back. They're doing what they love and, their goal in life, and they're off in this other place, but they're going to wait for them until they're done. Just don't forget about them. That's another lyric in here. Oh my God, it's so sad. And I'm not going to make this any better because I'm going to talk about Saki Kabata for a quick second here. She was a finalist in a competition to join Morning Musume, which is arguably the biggest idol group in Japan. This was at the age of 16. She didn't make that, but she was offered 4 record deals after a second chance audition a couple years later. And she had a raucous couple of years, just thrown around labels and from, one project to another. But in January of 2004, this person who she's mentioned as either a friend or a professional mentor was killed in a car accident. And Lonely Rolling Star came out in March of that year, only 2 months later. So these lyrics about going away while they wait for you, hits close to home, man.
You want to talk about the delivery a little bit here. I see, and I think this ties into it. The chorus in particular, the harmonies that go with it are in this like giant, like slightly echoey, atmospheric sounding kind of thing that's backing up the lyrics, that's backing up that delivery, which isn't a perfect delivery. It's beautiful.
really is. Slight imperfections. The instrumentation here is so sparkling and very cute. We're on the verge of tears, folks. This is such a good track.
And it's just bopping along the whole do. Like, oh, it's so hard to listen to now.
This is track 7. The name of the song is Walking on a Star, though the Japanese loosely translates to The Wonderful Star's Walk is Wonderful.
So, Jeff, I have to ask you again, what is it about these songs in between the stage music songs that grab you, that keep you coming back to them? Because, again, I go back to that overture. I'm like, yep, that's the overture, and I want to get to the stage music. But I'm with you on re-listening to this. I keep getting pulled into what I know as that's just the main menu music. Let's go into a stage. But I do keep coming back to it. Why is that?
Well, I think it has to do with just how these instruments and styles are mixed. This is a part of what Shibuya-kei is all about, is just taking these disparate sources, throwing them together. There's some thematic element to them that's keeping them cohesive. Shibuya-kei itself has like this French bossa nova, Brazilian bossa nova background to it, or like, the 60s music to it. But I think with these electronic accents on top of acoustic instruments, that is something that we see pretty often when it comes to these interlude tracks. And so we kind of expect them. Now it's a pattern, right? So they could be strange or boring, but I think in the case of this album, it does a really good job of keeping us going and keeping us interested. But that's really all there is to say about this. Not much else besides it's cute. Let's move on. And to that end, we go to track 8, Katamari Mambo, the Katamari Syndrome remix. And the composer of this track is the same as the previous track. It's Yuri Misumi. The lyrics here are by Kazuyuki Oda and Yuri Misumi. And the performers on this track, Nobue Matsubara and Sakamoto-chan.
I want to talk about Sakamoto right off the bat here, because listening to this song, I've always been like, oh, that's definitely like a comedian, like kind of delivery to it. And without knowing the people behind it before going into the formal review here, it's like liberating to know, oh, I was right the whole time. That's totally a comedian.
Yeah, not only does it come across in his delivery, but also if you know Japanese honorifics, like we mentioned earlier with Sama, Sakamoto-chan, the chan suffix of his name is used for children or more commonly for young girls. So the fact that he's using it is ridiculous and really gives away his persona before you even hear him. Enka is known for its high inflection. The vibrato is so heavy, there's so much drama. People are wearing traditional dress when they're singing enka. There's traditional Japanese instruments sometimes. And that doesn't happen here. These enka singers are being given pop music, really. And it's not to say that, they're not capable of doing this kind of thing, but they have to tone down a lot of that drama that they would normally do for enka to perform these songs. And that's certainly true here. I think her performance is fantastic. She sounds great. We're going to get into how Yumiyake has this thing for doing one take recordings where people are only given one shot to get it right. And that's the take they go with. She sounds like such a professional, and here's Sakamoto-chan just, interrupting with these little bits of humor.
I do want to know what they're probably going for. Maybe is manzai in Japanese, and that's you have a straight man, you have a funny man. It's like a very typical Japanese comedy style, and that's what I get out of this. Even though it's like comedian and enka singer, like that's the pairing that they're going for here.
Love the melodies, love the bongos, because that's been like a consistent theme here.
Oh, I just love the It's so good. Don't tell me it's not good, because it's so good.
No disagreement there, but this isn't really a mambo. If I have to criticize it.
All right. Okay.
We're going to go to track 9. This is the track You Are Smart. The composer is Akitaka Toyama. And, supposedly this is an interlude song, but I like to think of it as more than just that in this case.
No, so now I'm blanking. Now I'm double guessing myself whether Wanda Wanda or You Are Smart is actually the first level in America, or if this is Make a Star 5. But yeah, and I feel like you uncharacteristically have very little to say about it. But there's not much to it though, right? I mean, I feel like you get Pac-Man sounds. I'd have to go back and double check if they're actually Pac-Man sounds. because it is Namco, so they can just use it if they want in their own music. But that's really all there is going for it.
Well, you bring up something really interesting there, because we've already learned from Miyake that he was a fan of Namco game music. I mean, Harumi Hosono put out that album Video Game Music.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's ingrained in his DNA that he loves this kind of music. So it is really cute to see that here. I find it fascinating. But apart from that, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, there's not much to it. It's just that you are smart.
Again, the charm of the soundtrack is how well they break up the pace with these major songs and then these minor interlude songs. I wouldn't say it's predictable, but it's nice. Like the flow is really good, really consistent, especially through this part of the album.
But the thing here is that this isn't actually an interlude song. It's actually a stage song. But the fact that it comes across that way in a track list, strange.
Strange, but maybe it has to do with the fact that we don't get lyrics here. It's really just sample based.
Yeah, and we're running out of other actual interlude tracks. So, they got to start putting other ones together.
All right, track 10, Gin and Tonic and Red Roses. The rough translation from the Japanese, a crimson rose and a gin tonic. Composer Asuka Sakai, lyrics as well. The performer here is Ado Mizumori, and in the chorus is Asami Shimada.
I am always down for a swing drum-only breakdown. Let's go.
I think actually it fits well in the soundtrack at this point, because now in the middle, we don't really get much comedy here. We had a lot more uplifting and upbeat and funny songs in the beginning. Here it's really starting to get more serious. You love this song, Mike? It sounds like, right?
I do. I absolutely do, yeah.
For myself, I'm not, this isn't a highlight for me. I think it is enjoyable, but these swing throwbacks, it's not the first time I've heard this kind of thing. I actually kind of get tired of it, but that's just from my prior experience. So for me, it's nice, but I tend to...
you know what? So during that time, was the early aughts where everyone decided they were going to get back into swing music. I didn't fall for it then, so it never truly affected me. So I can still appreciate this stuff when it comes up.
Oh, that's a really good point.
God, that was like a week long that everyone decided that. That was so weird.
Yeah, so true.
What else do you want to say about it? I mean, I love the kind of like freestyle scatting, like hoop a doop a doop boop boop and bop. Ba, 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 ba. I think it also helps because we were playing such a quirky Japanese game. So to have songs like this come along that didn't necessitate me knowing Japanese to be able to enjoy them, I really appreciated that.
I want to focus on the vocalist Ado Mizumori. So she's an actress. I think she has this really cute vocal style that's really attractive. When I was searching her up, Mike, I happened to find this really, really interesting video doing a performance of a song for what looked like a Hawaiian themed meeting of sorts.
Okay.
And the song is King Hamehameha.
King Hamehameha or King Kamehameha?
The title of the video is King Hamehameha.
Okay.
You can hear the kind of cute inflections that she does in the song as well. So interesting. Yeah, so that's her thing. She plays off being really cute. You hear that in the swing. I think her attitude is really sparkling here. Maybe the swing instrumental doesn't do much for me, but her vocal is, I think, a standout.
So then we get into the next song, which again, I'm second guessing myself. Is this what we got as the first level background music? I'm pretty sure. And Jeff, you would know if you were doing a bunch of 2-player music. It's the 2-player win music. And I felt like it was actually a terrible introduction to the game soundtrack. Why would they do something like that? Wanta Wanta, yeah, it's not a highlight for me on this game, the soundtrack.
Oh, that's interesting because I actually do consider it a highlight. It's one of my favorites. There's nothing to it. It's just this interesting vocal that I guess you could say it's like a vocal sample that's just remixed a bit to be more melodic.
And then you just kind of like build on it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. You throw it on top of itself and, give it some harmony. Very cute. I mean, this isn't a long song, but I actually love it a lot because the harmonies are very sweet to me.
Okay.
But something else that's interesting about it, this is according to Miyake. We will definitely post this interview in the show notes as well. But apparently this is his take on the sound Ultraman makes as he ascends into the sky in the series Ultra 7.
Okay.
What's hysterical is that he imitates this sound in the interview. And so I just imagine him with his recorder doing these sounds and then just thinks, you know what? That'd be a really good idea for a song. You have to appreciate Keita Takahashi, the creator of this game, because I think a track like this reflects just how much autonomy he gave to Yumi-ake and his team to come up with the soundtrack. Because someone who saw this probably recognizes the Wanda 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 as an Ultraman sound and might have thrown it away and just been like, what is this gibberish? And instead, we actually get it as a track. And I know I'm sounding like I'm making a big deal out of such a small song. But again, as an interlude song, it just works so well. We don't have to focus on lyrics. There's nothing heavy about it. It's just this nice amount of brevity before we move on to the next track. I really do appreciate that.
And I do think you need a song like this for a stage every once in a while too. Not everything can be the big swing, big band, mambo songs. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, exactly. Let's remember, this is the soundtrack to a video game as well as a CD on its own. What a strange duality, but it's tracks like this that I think make it work so well.
Jeff, I want to wad you up into my life.
Is that really what he's saying, Mike?
I don't know. That's what we've always said since 2004, right?
I don't know. I've seen so many takes on the internet. We are talking about track 12, Que Sera Sera. Composer, Asuka Sakai. And in the lyrics, it's her as well as Natsuki Isaki. The performer here is Charles Kosei, who, if you've ever heard Lupin III, you've heard his voice before in the theme. Yeah, what an interesting track. I agree, Mike. I guess he does want to wad us up into his life.
I love this track. It's so good. I think because of the wad, it's super memorable from that. But I love the lounge. Like, we're going from the swing to the mambo to the lounge to the big band music. Like, it all fits in really well. Meanwhile, every other stage is doing this weird experimental electronic stuff. And like I was alluding to earlier, somehow every single one of these songs singularly epitomizes what Katamari sounds like too. I love it.
I wanna word you into my life. Let's love up to make a single star in the sky to you.
Yeah, completely agree. Besides Charles Kosei, who does a fantastic job on the vocal, he's a jazz musician, by the way. Man, the combination here is so good. It doesn't seem like a stretch to include either because we got the swing, we got what was supposed to be a mambo, bossa nova, Shibuya-kei, of course, wrapping all around this here. It works, even though it seems kind of off a little bit. We're going to move on. Track 13, Angel Gifts, or roughly translated Japanese here, Angel Flavors Present. The composer is Yumi-ake. We get a tonal shift here.
Yeah.
This, to me, Mike, isn't so much an interlude song. I mean, it is in the fact that there's no vocal, not much to pay attention to here. But I got to tell you, this was the part in my first listen. I remember this specifically, where I was like, whoa, we're about to go somewhere with this. Because it starts so simple with that guitar intro, and things are very low. It's starting to build a little bit. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, this is major. We're getting a shift. This is going to be interesting. And it just doesn't go anywhere.
I can tell you, it should be right around 2 minutes, 30 seconds. That is where something should happen, and nothing happens. Like, it gets a little more spacious, and I guess that's the release of the song, but it just doesn't work. And what's so weird about this, Jeff, this is the track. I swear I've never heard this song before in my life. I've listened to this album on repeat for, a month and a half at this point. I could tell you, nope, I've never heard the song before in my life, up until this very moment. I cannot keep the song in my short-term or long-term memory, apparently.
I don't blame you, because it just doesn't do anything. And it's, the disappointment in my voice, I cannot state it enough. There should have been a beat drop or something. I mean, I know as cliche as that sounds, it would have worked so well here. And it, just nothing happens. It's not to say that it meanders. Well, I guess you could say it meanders, because like you were saying, Mike, this is a track that's hard to remember for you. I don't disagree with that, because it could go somewhere, but then they bring in some tinny synth, or they have the vocal harmony in the background, and And that's nice, but there's no rhythm. Like there's no percussion coming in to really give it some heft. And it totally could have used it. So lost opportunity. That's all I have to say about it.
All right. Well, I am finding more and more in my life that I am a recovering bossa nova fan. So I am ready for this next track.
Yes, track 14, Roll Me In. Composer here, Hideki Tobita. The lyrics, Hideki Tobita. The performers, Yui Asaka and Mika Sato in the chorus. What do you want to say about it, Mike?
Anytime we get this. All right. So I just asked my buddy Julian the other day about this because there is a song in Final Fantasy XIV that is called Papaya. Papaya, 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 papaya. Do. And I've always wanted to know, what is it about papaya in bossa nova style songs in Japanese? Is that a thing? Are we just truly in love with papayas? But he says, nah, it's just like a nonsense thing. That's just what it is. That's just what they say and what they use.
Yeah, I mean, scat singing. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of jazz influence in here, but yeah, the theme definitely fits within that. In fact, I would argue that this is probably like the most Shibuya-kei, not just because of this bossa nova background, which, yeah, this is real bossa nova. Thank you, Hideki Tobita.
Is it like the mix of things? Because we go from this like real chill acoustic guitar that it like gets us going and picks up with the song. We get smooth operator saxophone going on in here as well. I mean, the song has it all.
It does. And I mean, it turns sweet as well because the violins come in there towards the end. I love this track because there are just these strange elements here to make the song. But since we've passed the previous track, which has kind of turned things into a more dramatic tone, this continues that drama and it just shows itself off as almost like the serious track. You could take this out of this soundtrack. It could be a great song on its own on any straight Shibuya-kei album, which I cannot say about the other tracks because there's some humorous element. It's kind of low key, or maybe it's not as serious. And this one, I feel, really drives the point home.
You know where I want to hear this song, Jeff? Is you and I sitting with a drink at the back of a cruise ship. This is where I need it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. You mix that in with other bossa nova tracks and it will fit right in. The one thing, though, I just want to bring up the lyrics here because they're so weird. Let me just spell this one out for people and you tell me what you think. I've been searching, seeking, gazing at the stars inside a miniature garden. Only the transparent moon inside the dancing darkness sets free the sparkling gems to stain the sky with jewels. Only the tears of the sun spill down, sparkling. As we cuddle together, I gaze at you with just the tip of my finger rolling box. While we roll around, I need you to tell me, harden yourself. What? What do you mean harden yourself? What? We were going on such a lovely track here. Well, except for the rolling box thing, but it was like so romantic and it fits so well with the music. And now again, this can come down to however the translations work for this or who's translating it. But isn't that weird?
I don't have anything for you, man. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Perplexed.
Yeah. Yui Asaka, who I love her performance here. Great singing tone and just fits so well with the music in the background.
So
very smooth.
Yeah.
You were saying smooth operator. Yes. I completely agree with that. I definitely see it. She is an actress and a J-pop idol from the 1980s, released nearly 2 albums a year from 1986 to 1993, and was on Japanese TV a bunch of times. So definitely a relevant cultural figure here, getting another boost into the mainstream from this soundtrack. Katamari Stars, track 15, Hideki Tobita again. And sure, let's go back into the digital glitch stuff, I guess.
We haven't had a menu song in a while, so this is the Constellation menu music, and yeah, you said glitchy. That's the kind of word I would use to describe it, but this is actually like a musical movement.
I would say so. And what is that piccolo in the back there?
Maybe.
It's like a piccolo or recorder.
Yeah.
That really high flute noise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's like the perfect chill out song that works in, they used to call them chill out rooms when you would go to a rave, where you have
right.
like the heavy drug fueled excess going on the dance floor, but you have their chill out room rooms where you would calm down. And this is like perfect for that environment where it's like, getting off the high of all this.
This is the I gotta sit down song.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I gotta sit down song. And this song more than the other interlude songs that we've heard, just because it's so chill.
Yeah.
So I do like it for that.
Yep. All right, Jeff, the kids are coming for you.
Oh God. Track 16, Cherry Tree Times, or roughly translated, Cherry Blossom Color Season. This is a Yumiyaki composition, did the lyrics as well. And the performers, I will let the audience go and look up the names of the kids themselves. We have too many to go through here. There are a lot of children singing on this song. The goddamn children, Mike.
You say that, but this song, yes, this game's soundtrack is quirky. It absolutely is. But while it is quirky, it can simultaneously prove itself as being absolutely beautiful. The harmonies the kids pull off in this song are out of this world, man.
You would think that this would be the most difficult thing to do, is get kids to focus on singing. And they just bring out these performances that are so good. And it pains me to say this, Mike, but when I look at people talking about this track online, there seems to be this huge split between the folks that love this song and the people that absolutely hate it. And I think it's because, yes, you are listening to screeching children. I don't want to say screeching as seriously as I am here, but, let's be honest. These are kids. Yes, they're not hitting the notes 100% all the time.
No, but that's what's making it so endearing here. And I think it misleads you. The off-keyness and the wavering in the verses. I think you hear that, and then if you're the kind of person that just immediately shuts down at that point, the song has lost you, and that's unfortunate because what you're about to get next transcends that 1,000,000%.
And when that cello shows up, oh, come on. It's so emotional, and I love every part of the song. I thought it was weird at first listen, but, we've been building up to this moment where I think since around like track 13 or 12, we get this more serious tone, and it sells it here, because if this were mixed in with some of the more lighthearted songs in the beginning, this would be weird. But because we're more serious, more dramatic, it fits perfectly. It's such a good moment here in the soundtrack. I just want to bring up the lyrics real quick, because this particular lyric, we were exploring the city as the afternoon descended. I remember being shy, blushing to the touch of your hand. Those were the days when small things made us feel content. Those were the days? Jesus Christ, you're freaking children. Go out and play, for Christ's sakes. One more thing. Yumiyaki himself has actually said that this is his favorite song of the soundtrack because, I'm going to quote him here, "This was kind of a presentation track for myself, showing that I could compose songs with point blank chords and melody. I think it went pretty well, but I'm flattering myself." Yeah, I don't have much more to say about it. I love this expansive string music in the background here. Very soft percussion. The kids are front and center and just singing their hearts out. And I think it's just so sweet. It's absolutely a beautiful track. Yep. And it's followed up by Space. So this is the track Lovely Angel, track 17, composers Yumiyaki again.
I think you need a moment after the kids there. So this is the beating of level music. I hear this and I just think this is 2001: A Space Odyssey right here in Katamari form.
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with all that space and the echo effects and things being thrown in there. Definitely menu music. Really nice and very appropriate at this point in time. Not much else to say about it, so we're going to move on, but to another track we're not going to say much about, and that's Stardust Fanfare, track 18.
It's 8 seconds. It's da-da-da, like you're done. That's it.
Sure, yeah. Why not?
You got to include it. It's a game soundtrack. You have to put it on there.
Track 19, The Last Samba. The composer is Asuka Sakai. The performer, Katamari Sambatai. Dear God, the screaming. Is it screaming? What is it, Mike?
It sounds it, but then you think, oh, maybe that's actually just instruments trying to approximate it.
I'd certainly say it's more of a whistle than a scream, but when it hits you at first, it just sounds like someone is screaming at you from the start of this thing. And to be honest, I think this is the weakest track because it really just doesn't do much for me.
So this is the, not the credits music, but the ending cutscene music. So you're getting like the character names and it's showing everyone off and the prince is doing his little dance. Like that's what it's representing here, but it is kind of this whiplash in the context of listening to the sound.
Yeah, especially when we get this previous, 8 seconds of game music and we're given more game music. I would say, yeah, this is more of a samba, but the loudness and the raucous energy, especially when we come from the seriousness of the previous track.
And the next one too.
Yeah, and the next one too. Just weirdly placed, but I'm going to say something that I've heard you say many times in our reviews, Mike.
Okay.
I don't know where else I would put this.
Yeah, right. Because, I mean, you really think about it, they're trying to be not entirely chronological about stuff, more or less, sort of, kind of. Now that I say that, I'd have to go back and actually look at it. But there was a game narrative flow to the placement on things here. Like, you're going to start with the overture and you're going to end with the ending theme. So you have to find your way in between somehow.
Yeah, definitely worth mentioning. We hear that main theme again here, like I was talking about in the beginning with the book ending. So yes, it is definitely relevant. Also, I kind of like the idea that this is sort of like a block party.
Yeah, I can see that, sure.
In the middle of things. Yeah, so it's a celebration. But let's move on to, I think, what for many people is probably a highlight of this album, and that is Katamari of Love, ending theme, track 20. Composers here, Yoshihito Yano and Akitaka Toyama. Lyrics by them as well. Performer, Shigeru Matsuzaki.
This is 70s, 80s anime space soap opera ending theme, and I am here for it.
Why did I have a feeling you were going to love this track?
I'm pretty sure I saw a singer from Space Adventure Cobra songs, so that makes sense too.
Oh, interesting. Okay, sure, because Space Adventure Cobra, I think that was one of this person's acting roles, right? Shigeru Matsuzaki?
Played Cobra, I think, in just the film.
Interesting, because this person has quite a history with all these acting gigs he's had. Mm-hmm. Also, has been putting out music since the late 90s. Super dramatic voice.
Oh, yeah, it's so good. Yeah, it's just that, like, it's that anisong no kimochi.
There's acting to the song as well as the singing, and because his speaking parts are really interesting, he's putting 100% out there. Although I question the lyrics here because this particular lyric, actually, Mike, let me have you read this lyric.
Oh, isn't this our blue planet? Such a beautiful star. Just a few things we need. Plenty of sleep, a balanced diet, love for our green mother, and a nice tan to boot.
バランスの取れた食生活
I'm not going to say much more about it because it just fits. I mean,
just the drama and the confidence behind it. And we need a tan as well. Bless our green mother. Yes, let's do this.
Yep. I think it fits within the realm of the soundtrack just because at this point, it ain't weird. We've heard weirder things before.
We've heard everything at this point. Let's go.
Yep, exactly. But what about it as, I say, quote, traditional ending song? Because the last track we're going to get to after this was thrown in later.
Yeah.
So what about this being the ending song do we think works so well?
But again, you got to put it in context. So if we're going to pull from enka and bossa nova and swing and everything, we got to get the anime song in here somewhere.
Yeah. I think that's probably the best way to phrase it because to me, it stands out stylistically a bit more because it is that 80s dramatic music.
Yeah, for sure.
And the vocalist is so heavy in the front there. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we get with this. And we don't see it that much in the rest of the soundtrack. So it is kind of off, but it makes sense because we are highly dramatizing this super simple gameplay concept.
Right. Just how absurd it is. Like like we just went through in its lyrics. Its lyrics are totally absurd. The premise of this game is absurd. So let's just commit to the bit here.
Yeah. And that is, I think, why the soundtrack is so well regarded because as an album, it does what it has to do. It sets up the concept right in the beginning. It is sort of playful and fun in the beginning, turns serious in the middle. We get to this point and we're wrapping things up. And this is doing that. It's giving us that last bit of drama just to put things to a close while still being quirky and weird like the rest of the album. Mm-hmm. It's stunning. It's honestly stunning to me, Mike, because I'm not a huge fan of the track. I would tend to skip it. I won't listen to it by itself, but it does the job. All right, but let's not discredit the actual last track as we get on the soundtrack here, which is track 21, Katamari March Damacy, the composer Yumi-ake. Yeah, I will let this be the real ending. A nice summarization, perfect ending, wouldn't change it.
Yeah, this pulls you back to, all right, this is a Katamari song. Like we're tough to describe, but it does bring you kind of like full circle back around to the nanas at the beginning.
Yes, exactly. We just get very simple instrumentation, this processed vocal there. Yeah, it's as simple as the first track, very cyclical, very well done. And that's it. What else can we say about this? I loved it so much that I paid, the extra shipping to get it from CG Japan back in, I think it was 2005, whenever the soundtrack actually came out. It's a prized CD in my collection. I've gotten rid of all my CDs basically, except for this one, because this is such a rarity, and you can't get it in the US anywhere. I mean, Mike, have you seen any place where you could listen to us besides, the obvious places like YouTube, but have you seen this on streaming services or anywhere else?
I don't want to be an advocate for it, but everything's on YouTube. I mean, it's there, so.
Yeah, pretty much. I will say that if you do want to get the CD, because you're not going to find it on streaming services as far as I can tell, CD Japan does still have it, but it's going to cost you a total of about $35 to $50 depending on the shipping that you pick.
Yeah, that's standard.
And the country that you're in, this is US shipping rates here. You could have bought it on vinyl in 2018. God forbid if I'd known about this. And it sold out. This was a limited pressing. The cover was very, I would say like maybe Art Deco style. Fascinating that they put this release out in 2018 of all times. But I definitely recommend people listen to the soundtrack because as a game soundtrack, it's great. As its own CD, it's great. It's astonishing how well this is wrapped up. But in terms of the recognition it's received, it won the IGN and GameSpot Soundtrack of the Year Award in 2004. It was nominated for Outstanding Achievement in Original Music Composition at the 8th Annual Interactive Achievement Awards. That's February 2005. And it hit the charts in Japan. It was number 191.
It charted.
And also, it's in the MoMA collection of video games next to Vib-ribbon, like I mentioned in the last episode. So it's got a lot of achievement, but I think really the best critical praise you can find for this game is the people who played the game have listened to the soundtrack and have gone on to do amazing things with it. I reached out to Anamanaguchi since it'd been, I think, 11 years since we interviewed them, Mike. Can you imagine?
It's crazy. I still love that interview so much.
I reached out to Peter Berkman and just wanted to ask if he could give me a statement, if he had heard the soundtrack and whatnot. And he told me that he heard the soundtrack right when he was just starting to mess around with chip music. It's still the best. Now, I say people should go and check out the soundtrack regardless of whether they play the game or not, but I think it might be worth just going over some of the negatives here. I put this in quotes. What the hell is this? I don't even.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's going to scare the normies a little bit, but oh well.
It's so stupid, this kind of thing where we say, oh, well, it's not in English, so we're not going to appreciate it. Like, it's just such a baseless, contrived way of thinking. It doesn't matter if it's English or not. Good music is good music. You listen to it, you like the melody.
Good music is good music. Good voice acting is good voice acting. Going on record saying it.
And Mike, you said it before, there is no meaning to the word objective, but here, objectively, this is good music, so deal with it. Now, but I do understand, even if you knew the Japanese language, if you don't play the game, these are weird love songs that have to do with like a prince, this topic of like rolling a ball and what does that mean? And so it is quirky, and that certainly has something going against it if you're just this regular pop music listener.
But even if you don't know the language, something like Lonely Rolling Star, even though we dove into it a little more, you still get the sorrow from that song. Like you understand the emotion coming through in it, even without knowing the language.
Yeah, completely agree. One other negative I want to bring up, which kind of has to do with this cut and paste style, the Shibuya-kei style that we talked about. MagFest 13, this was in 2013, and Yumi is a guest there, as well as Yoshihito Yano, the songwriter of Lonely Rolling Star. A fan walks up to the microphone during a question-answer session, and he asked, how does the soundtrack have a Katamari sound when it pulls from so many different musical styles? And the answer they gave is that they played different styles of music in the background as they were playing the game, and then made suggestions on vocalists based on the combination.
All right.
A very organic procedure. So why do I bring this up as a negative? Because as a consistent listen, independent of its context, the frequent shifts in genre can be a bit off-putting because you're not listening to strictly a bossa nova album or strictly a jazz album. You're listening to essentially a video game soundtrack. So you have all these electric noises and whatnot, but it's Shibuya-kei. So it's recontextualized. Things are remixed. Things are thrown in. And I think that alone is kind of off-putting. Going back to the previous point about the strangeness of everything and the quirkiness, it really does show up in the instrumentation as well. Obviously, if you're not getting into this, you're not going to get into Shibuya-kei, but I actually think it's really worth looking at the melodicism here. And I brought it up with things like in the overture track 3 with Asuka Sakai, and how she's using voice leading as this great technique to take all these weird chords but tie them together. Things like that, I think, are symbolic of the amount of talent these composers have. And honestly, honestly, Mike, that has to be one of the most amazing things about the soundtrack. We have so many people taking part in this, from the vocalists to the songwriters. You could argue too many cooks in the kitchen, but they just bring out some of the best stuff that I'd argue they'd ever done. Because you've got like the person who does the soundtrack to Ridge Racer and Tekken games giving free reign to do whatever he wants outside of what Namco usually does with him. And so it's quite amazing to see just where their ambitions go and how they succeed at it. I think that's the most important part of all this. Well, now that we've finished with the review of the soundtrack to Katamari Damacy, what do you think would be a good forward step after this? What would you listen to after this?
Everlasting Love. Let's go. We love Katamari. Just listen to the next game soundtrack.
Yeah, I'd say that the soundtracks to the sequel games are pretty good. We Love Katamari had a great soundtrack. Some returning personnel in those games as well. Very interesting. Let me just bring it over to Shibuya-kei. Yeah, if you like this cut and paste style that you get a hint of here, I wouldn't say this is completely a Shibuya-kei album, even though it's been referenced as such in some places. Really, you should go look at the work of Cornelius or Fantastic Plastic Machine or Pizzicato 5. Really amazing stuff. Really interesting combinations of things. Yeah, Mike, like you said, might even become a fan of Bossa Nova after listening to some of this too.
I feel like if you're going to go surface level with some of this music, if you like the swing and the lounge and the jazz, you could go to a modern like Super Mario Odyssey soundtrack and get a lot out of that.
Yeah, I mean, Shibuya-kei was such a thing in Japan that it shows up in a couple other places. Mike, the track you talked about from Final Fantasy XIV, quintessential.
Oh my God, this is the most diverse soundtrack on the face of the planet. I just want to always listen to all Final Fantasy XIV music. It is every genre. It is everything. It is perfect. It is my precious special child.
Yeah, even there, they had to have the obligatory Shibuya-kei song.
Of course.
Lastly, Enka. If you're into this kind of thing, there is so much music to check out. Just search for it on YouTube. You'll find plenty there. Super dramatic, lots of vibrato, very traditional, but I think for the drama, it's sort of like, again, not wanting to offend anybody, but it's sort of like musicals in a way where the drama that you get can be a little off-putting. Maybe you're not into that kind of thing. Maybe you don't want it to see so ham-fisted.
Sure. Yeah.
But sometimes that's just the right remedy for when you're feeling downtrodden. So I definitely recommend checking it out.
And I know and recognize that some of the folks listening to this are probably coming from my Dragon Ball side of things. So you've certainly heard Kiyoshi Hikawa, like I mentioned earlier in the show, second opening theme to Super, Limit Break Survivor. But again, he is one of the biggest Enka stars in Japan. So go listen to some more of his music. You might be surprised by what you hear and what you like.
Fantastic. All right, I want to go step back a little bit and talk about the game itself. We haven't done that much here, and I will link to some resources to talk about the game. Our focus is on the music, so obviously that's what we talk about here. But just to bring in some info about the game, because the success of the soundtrack is kind of wrapped in with the success of the game as well.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of begrudging success going on with Katamari. There was no interest in doing a sequel and was kind of convinced, demanded to do that. And beyond that, like the original vision isn't necessarily there in those games.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there was a shift in focus when you're establishing something new. And this is something that Yumi brings up in that interview as well. When you bring in something new, you have so much realm to play around. And once that becomes successful, there come your limitations, because now you can't really stray away from that, or you're alienating the audience you just built for yourself. And you see that in these games where they kind of try to tread down the same track, and varying degrees of success here. But with the game designer Keita Takahashi himself, he left Namco in 2009 and left Japan shortly after that to go work on a game in Vancouver for a company that would later develop the real-time collaboration platform Slack. Yes, that's Slack. Now, Asuka Sakai, who I've raved about a couple times during this review, married Katamari's creator Keita Takahashi at some point after the game's release. I can't tell you exactly when, because that information just doesn't exist apparently in English Google, but I find that cute nonetheless. Also, they apparently live in San Francisco now.
Oh, all right. Let's go visit.
Yeah. If they're still there, we'll see. They also created a company in 2010 called Uvula, which was set to support Takahashi's freelance game design career. And I suggest people check out Takahashi's latest creation, Watam, from 2019 for the PlayStation 4 and Windows. It looks vaguely familiar. It's utterly adorable. It's also very creepy, but it's adorable. And I'll make sure to put a link for that in the show notes. As for Yumi, he has led or contributed to most of the Katamari games and continues to work on the soundtracks to Ridge Racer and Tekken games, as well as other projects. I think it was fun to relive all of this and be able to play the games again, that was definitely
that
fun.
was fun. I got to get back to it. I left off after those 2 sessions, and it was like, I'm going to refamiliarize myself with the early levels for the podcast and get back into it that way too. Now I'm kind of itching, I got to go play more Katamari. I don't care that we're done.
If anything, the game itself is just this fun little quirky game. You don't have to get highly invested in it. It's just so well balanced. The same could be said of the sequel, that they did such a good job on that game as well. Definitely recommend playing it.
Sequel's really good. I don't know when you're planning on releasing it, but right this second, I'm pretty sure Katamari Reroll is $10 on every platform. I got it for $10. Not directly on Steam, but it was a Steam code at one of the other retailers. I think I just saw today on the Nintendo eShop, it's down to $10. So this is a game that you will be able to get for $10 as well. And that's a great way to experience the music for the first time. I think that's the only way to experience it for the first time. And it's going to be tough to listen to it any other way unless you stream it on YouTube. So check it out, man. Just check it out. So that said, that is our review of Katamari Fortissimo Damacy. We are always interested in hearing what you have to say about the albums we review as well. So join the discussion on our subreddit or send us your take, feedback at lo-fidelity.info.
Next time on the show, we are going to be doing something completely different. Until then, thank you for listening to Low Fidelity, and we'll see you again in the next episode.